nice. We're doing it twice. Welcome to the Sweat, everybody. Presented by DraftKings. Coming to you live now every Saturday and Sunday morning, 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock Eastern Time on DraftKings Network, on VSiN, plus all of our glorious DraftKings social channels. Good morning, gentlemen. Julian Edlow, Steve Buchanan. I am Emerson Lancia. We'll be dishing out some best bets and DFS plays here for the next 2 hours. A lot to get to. Yes, and a lot of time to get to it. We will be starting with our millionaire contest here on DraftKings. Some DFS chatter, gentlemen. The bag of $1 million going to the winner of said contest. Now, the Week 1 tournament, by the way, ready for you to enter right meow on DraftKings. We'll get to the best ball strategy in just a moment. First, let's preview the upcoming DFS season as a whole here, Stephen. Which quarterback do you think will be in your lineup most often?
Yeah, I talked about him a little bit yesterday on the show, but I think Kenny Pickett, I really think he's going to take it a step forward this upcoming season too. And if you look at the lines that are already set, because we have every line up on for the NFL season, I'm currently on DraftKings Sportsbook, they're short underdogs for the first 3 weeks of the season. So you're expecting them to be in these close, tight games. Week 4, they play the Houston Texans. They're favorites for the first time in that game in Week 4, 3.5-point favorites in that one. So really close games coming up. And then you look at the receivers that are going to be surrounding him, Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, maybe get something out of Allen Robinson this year. We'll wait to see on that there. But, there's obviously some capable bodies around him that he can throw to. So I think with all that in mind, how he's looked in the preseason, I think he's really going to take a step forward, and I think he's going to be great in daily fantasy purposes as well.
Yeah, Steelers 2.5-point dogs at home against the 49ers in Week 1, which, by the way, we will preview the NFC West, look at some futures there coming up in this show. Jules, who do you think the quarterback is going to be in your lineup the most right now?
I'm not even going to go with a specific guy because I don't like players. I like spots. I want matchups, and it's something that I talked about yesterday. I'll play Sam Howell at $4,900 in Week 1. Why? Because he's at home going against the Arizona Cardinals, who very well could be one of the worst teams in football in the last 20 years. Yep. So the quarterback that is going to be in my lineup the most is going to be whoever is facing that Arizona team for as long as we can get them at an affordable price.
Is that a non-answer?
That's a good answer.
I mean, it was an answer.
I'm thinking outside the box.
Maybe it was a non-answer answer.
I'm thinking outside the box. Shows good initiative.
Okay.
Steve gave a boring answer.
I don't think you really have to overthink when I ask you some of the best stacks right now, Jules. Which team would you target here in terms of stacking?
So they're not on the Week 1 slate because they play in that Thursday night game. I think the Chiefs are going to be able to be stacked in a little bit different of a way this year. Obviously, we saw them without Tyreek Hill last year. Kelsey got a ton of ownership, and he should again. He's a tight end that kind of helps you fill that position where there aren't many other high scorers. But until we figure out what the hierarchy is with the rest of those receivers, I think there's some good value to be had there with Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney when he's healthy. You got MVS in the mix. You have some rookies stepping in that are unknowns, but if Mahomes has a good rapport with those guys, they could put up some big numbers early in the season while priced very cheap. So I just think that if you want to get Mahomes exposure while fading a Travis Kelce, you're going to be able to get very affordable prices with those receivers once Kansas City is on some of these main slates.
Is there any team in terms of stacking you think flying under the radar right now, Steve?
Yeah, potentially. And, I don't know if this one is going to work in Week 1 because we have to watch the injury status of Jerry Jeudy. But I think Russell Wilson and Jerry Jeudy is a very viable stack, not just for Week 1, but kind of throughout the season.
Yeah, they've suffered some crappy injuries here in the preseason for sure.
Sure, but when you look at the last 5 weeks of the season of those two guys together, Jeudy caught 33 of his 41 targets for 458 yards and 3 touchdowns. I mean, he was close to 1,000 yards last year, and think about how bad that Broncos team was throughout the year. To think that Jeudy was just under 1,000 receiving yards is still pretty impressive too. They improved that O-line, which is obviously a huge need for them. They were just absolutely ravaged by injuries last year, and when Russell Wilson is working with a clean pocket, 68% completion percentage, 7.6 yards per pass attempt, and 13 of his 16 touchdowns. So if he has some good protection in front of him, Russell Wilson is able to get downfield and get his receivers. So if and when Jeudy is healthy, which could potentially be Week 1, we're still not out of the woods yet, I think that's going to be a good stack for moving forward this season.
Well, Bukes, what about positions you'll be looking to save money at? There's running back, and then there's tight end. That always seems to be that top-heavy position in terms of fantasy.
Yeah, tight end's pretty popular too, but even going on defense, defense. There's a lot of times that where you look at like the winning $1 million lineup, there's a really cheap defense under $3K that people are able to use to get those sacks or those turnovers. Like kind of going off Julian's mentality for that first one there is like it's just the matchup base, especially with those defenses, because sometimes the defenses can be so unbelievably mispriced, especially if there's injuries, key injuries during the week. So just kind of watch the prices on those defenses, because there are a lot of times under that $3K range that you can plug and play some defenses that can get you some big fantasy points, sometimes more than the tight end position, which is a position a lot of people like to punt. So I think defense is one you really need to look at as well.
All right, Jules, besides defense, though, could you target tight end in this department? Could you target a running back for a position that you could save at, so you could go big and heavy at like wide receiver, quarterback?
For sure. And Steve makes a good point on the defense. That's something I was going to bring up. A lot of times you're looking at that lineup and, you got this $4,100 defense that can't fail you, and you can't figure out how to fit something in your lineup, and you go down $1,500 on defense, and that's what opens it all up and makes it all work. But as it pertains to tight end and running back, I just mentioned fading a Travis Kelce and playing some cheaper Kansas City wide receivers or something like that. I also think there's something to paying for a Travis Kelce at a tight end, because once you fade those top tight ends, you're looking at pretty minimal production. If you have a Kelce or that type of tight end in your lineup, you can still find a $4,500, $5,000 wide receiver or running back that is going to produce for you. So I do think that, sometimes saving at tight end, what everybody likes to do and punt there, isn't the move. You can pay there, and then you'll find guys on a weekly basis that we've been talking about, like Denver's beat up at receiver. You can find plenty of cheaper Denver receivers, cheaper Kansas City receivers, and plug and play them there. And then there's going to be running back injuries every week because it's the NFL and you can find guys there.
Well, speaking of running backs, you got Josh Jacobs, who finally signs like a deal with the Raiders yesterday, 1 year, $12 million. Barkley's on this 1 year deal with the Giants. I mean, how would you approach these running backs on contract years, Jules? Like, are they going to be like super motivated, get out there and absolutely destroy opposing defenses?
So they're super motivated, and their teams are going to want to get the most out of those 1 year deals. They don't own them long term in terms of their contract, so they will put them out there and kind of run them into the ground, you would think. So yeah, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, these are big names in fantasy the last couple years. They should probably be in positions where they're going to see significant touches once again.
And they're both so crucial to their team's success, and their quarterbacks are going to be relying heavily on those two dudes, Steve.
Sure, but there's never been a situation where I'm building my lineup based on their contract status. I could not give a crap about that, if I'm being brutally honest.
Yep.
If they're in the matchup that I think they're going to succeed, I'm going to play them contract status or not. Maybe that's to my detriment. Let me look at the camera. I don't care about that.
Love it. Love it, babe. You know what also I love? This best ball format that DraftKings is offering. It is absolutely blowing up, folks. So what it is, if you're unfamiliar with best ball, it's this format. You draft a team, and that's it. Like no trades, no pickups, no setting lineups. So each week, your optimal lineup's going to be set. Meanwhile, whoever scores the most points in your team is added until you have a full lineup. So your score's added up. Whoever scores the most at the end of the season wins.
Yeah.
That's it. So with a format like this, how different is your approach to building a successful fantasy point racking up team compared to other formats, Steve?
Yeah, I think you're going to go heavily into the wide receiver position when you're drafting early here. This is a PPR format, which DraftKings is, and you can get that pivotal 100-yard bonus for some of these receivers here. So I'm drafting a lot of top receivers early, where someone might be going to the quarterback position because they want to get that passing and the rushing and whatnot. But like, you want some of those pocket passing quarterbacks that you can get later in the rounds. They can get that 300-yard bonus. So you're adding that with some of the bonuses that you can get with the wide receivers, with the PPR format. Like, I think that's the important realm that you need to focus on, is getting those receivers early. Don't worry about the quarterbacks so much. And then running backs, we'll probably talk about that in a moment here too. That's something I don't usually do as much, go heavily on those guys. So I think wide receivers are really what you want to target early, because that's where a lot of your points are going to come from.
Kind of sounds like you're leaning a little bit towards fading running backs then.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, Jules, real quick here, just your strategy in terms of best ball stacks, and also it feels like your bench becomes a little bit more important.
Well, yeah, because, I mean, essentially there is no bench. They could be your starter if they play well. You're drafting it just, I mean, think about it. The name is best ball. If you're playing best ball, you're out on the golf course, there's 4 guys there, and you're going to use the best shot.
Dude, yes,
what do?
Let's go.
You swing for the fences, and that's exactly what you want to do in these drafts. So you're going to take high upside guys like Steve said, that are going to get a lot of receptions, get your 100-yard bonuses, catch deep passes into the end zone. So you're looking for guys that are going to have big weeks, and if they bust on certain weeks, then hey, that's fine, and one of your other guys is going to go off, is the way that you have to think about it. So, yeah, high upside, a lot of receivers, because that's the way that the NFL is trending, obviously. You know, for the first time in a while, we have, like, receivers going first, second picks in season-long leagues. So, that kind of tells you want receivers.
You got a sleeper there, wide receiver sleeper, very quickly?
Guys we talked about yesterday, like, I like Quentin Johnson, the rookie on the Chargers, a lot. You know, some of the Kansas City guys, George Pickens, I know Steve will like with Kenny Pickett.
What do you think?
I think Jonathan Mingo over with the Panthers, I think he can easily move up that depth chart. You look at the guys that are in front of him, Adam Thielen, DJ Chark, Terrence Marshall, like one injury or one guy who's ineffective, that's going to move Mingo up. He can stretch the field too. He's a deep downfield guy, so I think that's somebody on the Panthers who are really going to just be looking to play out this season here. I think he's someone that you consider late in those rounds.
And Jules, you're clearly loading up on wide receivers early here.
For sure, but I don't think running back is a complete fade. If that's going to be everybody else's strategy, then sure, be a little contrarian, look for some running backs in there too.
All right, Bukes, you've done such a phenomenal job. We're going to give you the next segment off.
Thanks.
We will have you back soon to see which MLB teams you like to hit their win total mark in the preseason. I'll be right after we talk some college football. The Big 12 team Jules is chasing. The ACC team he is fading. When the sweat returns, 240 seconds away. All right, college football is back, folks. The race for the national championship is officially on. Notre Dame, Sam Hartman, who looks like a sexy Jesus, cruising past Navy in Dublin. Caleb Williams, USC, and it's once again concerning defense getting the job done against San Jose State. UMass with a big win here, Jules. It
Did
took
not
them,
see that one coming.
Took them 5 games last year to hit 41 points, and then you have Hawaii covering against Vanderbilt, so we can look into some more college football futures similar to what we did yesterday. Let's do that right now. Before we do that, biggest winner yesterday in your mind, week 0 action?
Biggest winner, probably UMass. I mean, I know that Notre Dame ran away with it against Navy. USC got a win that we thought they were going to get anyway, but gave up a lot of points, kind of concerning. UMass hasn't opened the season with a road win since the 70s. They put up 41 points. The only bet that I put out that I actually played on Twitter yesterday was laying the 7 points with New Mexico State. I thought that they would roll UMass like they've done by double digits in 2 consecutive years, and I was completely wrong.
All right, any loser, biggest loser in your eyes?
Biggest loser, I would say,
besides you and your bets.
Well, 0-1, tough start, but we'll be back. Saving ourselves for week 1. Bankroll management. Let's
week 0 for
it.
everybody.
Week 0 was weird, honestly. Some of these results do not quite match up with the box scores if you're going through them. I would say the biggest loser is probably USC's defense, because if they're going to get into the college football playoff and win it all, they needed to improve on that side of the ball. We saw Caleb Williams and that offense is the same old team, 56 points. But if you're giving up 28 to San Jose State in the last 3 quarters, that is not good. And when you get around to playing the Washingtons, the Oregons, and the Pac-12, you are going to give up some serious points.
Okay, so you had a guest on your podcast recently.
I did.
On
I have
Reasonable
a podcast.
Odds. Yes, you do. You and Steven share this podcast. You had Phil Steele on, right? Because we're going to continue our conference previews right now, and we'll talk some ACC. And you asked him who the team to beat was in the conference, and this is what Phil had to say.
So I'll just ask you simply, Phil, are the Tigers back to their ACC dominance this season?
Yes, and I agree with you 100%. This is an under-the-radar team. In fact, when I talked to Coach Sweeney, going over the squad with him this year, remember that 2018 defense line they had loaded with NFL talent. He said that this year's group doesn't have the star power of 2018, but it's actually deeper in talent and experience. Give you one of my magazine question marks. I watched Peter Woods in the spring game. Heard about Peter Woods all season long, or all spring long. Talked to Coach Sweeney about Peter Woods. I wanted to make him a starter. I couldn't make him a starter. Who do you put him over? Xavier Thomas, Arroyo, Davis, Mescal, and you've got Williams back there, Page back there. This is an outstanding defensive line. Then you look at the linebackers, Carter and Trotter, 2 of the best in the country. The secondary is solid, probably the most depth they've had in the secondary in some time. Offensively, one of their top offensive lines they've had recently. The receiving core is good, probably above average. And then you look at the running backs with Shipley and Maffa, and I think Klubnik will do well. I saw a lot of preseason top 10s when I was writing the magazine that didn't even have Clemson in the top 10, which shows you that not a lot of folks around there watching them. But I have Clemson favored in all 12 games. The Florida State game got them a 4-point favorite. The Notre Dame game got them an 8-point favorite. I mean, what game do you put them an underdog in? Why the heck is it total 9.5?
I mean, playoff contenders aside, really, like the league features some talented quarterbacks, high-powered offenses, impressive defensive units. Do you agree Clemson is the team to beat in the ACC?
Oh, Clemson's the team. I think they're all the way back. A lot of FSU hype. We will see that game towards the end of September. Clemson a 3-point home favorite. I love them in that spot. But Phil's right. I don't know where they're going to be an underdog this season. They get to host Notre Dame after they went to Notre Dame and lost last season. I think that this team has the potential. People may be down on the ACC, but Clemson has the potential to run the table and then make it impossible for the College Football Playoff Committee to keep them out.
All right, and then you're fading Miami?
Miami is a team, I think, under 7.5 wins. I like it a lot. They're probably going to be favored in 7 games, so they're going to have to win all the games they're favored in and then steal one as an underdog at some point. The problem is Miami doesn't win the games they're favored in. If you go back over the last 5 years, they have a losing record outright in games where they are a single-digit favorite. So if they're a 7, 8, 9-point favorite, they generally drop that game outright. I don't trust in Miami. I think the schedule doesn't set up well for them. So I will go against Miami. The U is not going to be back in the ACC.
What or who do you like in the Big 12? Farewell year for Texas and Oklahoma. I have a feeling you like one of them to go out on a high note here.
Yeah, if Texas isn't back now, then I don't know when they're going to be back. They have depth at every position, top-end talent at every position. They have multiple quarterbacks that can go in there and play. They have a huge impact transfer at wide receiver from Georgia. I know they lost Bijan Robinson. They still have very capable running backs and a great offensive line. Schedule is a little bit tough, but Texas should be able to contend, make it to the Big 12 title game, and probably be a heavy favorite in that game. You're now laying juice on Texas to win the Big 12 on DraftKings Sportsbook. They're minus 250 just to make the championship game. Who they play, that could be up in the air. Oklahoma, Kansas State, people are high on Texas Tech. I think somebody could sneak in there, but I'd be shocked if Texas isn't in that game.
And what is it about Iowa State that has you fading them?
Yeah, I mean, they had the whole gambling scandal, obviously, with players on the team. They lost a lot of guys. There's still probably more to come. Their win total immediately dropped from 5.5 to 4.5. So they're a team, I think, if you're not going to fade them on the win total because it's already moved so much, they're a team at least early in the season that you probably want to go against. They, on the look-ahead line, were initially favored against Iowa in Week 2. They're now underdogs in that game. I think that could be Iowa minus a touchdown, and I would love the Hawkeyes in that spot early in the season.
And a team or conference winner outside of the Power 5, you feel like Toledo is headed back to the MAC title game?
Toledo's that team, and this is how I ended the podcast with Phil Steele. If you guys go check it out, I asked him, we covered Power 5 and then said if there's anybody else in the country that you believe in, what is that team that you want to hype up to finish up the podcast? And he said Toledo. They bring back 8 starters on offense, 8 starters on defense, including Daquan Finn, the quarterback that led that team last year and sat the last couple of games after they already had the division wrapped up. I think Toledo at minus 130 to win that division in the MAC is one of my favorite bets in college football. And then if you're going to have them in that game, you might as well play the plus 160 for them to come out on top.
I think many folks are expected to see them meet Ohio once again in that championship game. Rematch from last year, although the Bobcats losing to San Diego State last night. Let's look ahead to Thursday and Friday here. We got the Week 1 college football slate. Big game. Florida and Utah, Thursday. Which side are you backing here? Because I know Cameron Rising is coming back from an ACL. I do believe yesterday there was a report that he is listed as the starter for Utah. There were some questions there for a little while.
And I'm not buying it. So
Whoa.
I think this is the most interesting game on the board because of all the movement. It opens Utah laying double digits, comes down as low as 4.5 because everybody says Rising is going to miss this game. Then Rising is announced the starter, and it kind of just meets in the middle at a touchdown. All this, all this steam around Rising, I think that if it's in question, if he's able to play, then he's not going to be anywhere near 100% if he does go. Utah's season depends on them getting out to a fast start. Props to the Utes. They are giving themselves a difficult start. They have to play the Gators in Week 1, where I backed them last year in the Swamp, and Cam Rising almost led them on a game-winning drive before he threw an interception in the end zone. This is going to be a tough game. And then Week 2, they're at Baylor. So if they start 0-2, their season is over. They might not be able to afford to rest Cam Rising. So I think he's either going to wind up sitting out or play when he should not be playing. And that is why I will take the touchdown with the Gators. I know their win total is over only 5.5. People are down on them in the SEC, but they play the hardest schedule in the country. They have Graham Mertz at quarterback.
Yep,
I think
Wisconsin
that they're
transfer.
an SEC team, that plays a really hard schedule. People are a little down on. I think they're going to be able to produce early and out of conference, and a touchdown just seems like too much for me in that game.
That's an extremely hostile environment out there with the mighty Utah student section. Gators also incorporating a new defensive coordinator. What about Nebraska, Minnesota here? I totally forgot Matt Rule is going to be, he is there now as the head coach, trying to rebuild this program at Nebraska.
Yeah, and we saw how the Scott Frost rebuild went. Didn't go well.
Yeah, that was a dud.
I think that Matt Rule might be able to get it together, but these things take time. This was 6.5. I liked Minnesota at 6.5. It crossed a key number. I'm not going to play it at this point, but I'll make the argument for Minnesota. Minnesota, kind of like Florida in ways, except I'm probably a little bit stronger on Minnesota, is a really talented team that should give teams a hard time, but the schedule sets up so difficult for them in the Big Ten. They do have to play against both Ohio State and Michigan. They have a road game against Iowa. They have a lot of games that are going to be tough for them to lose, and I don't see them necessarily going over that win total, winning 8 games when their win total is 7 flat. But in the games that they should win, I see them performing very well because I like the talent a lot on that team. Nebraska's going to take some time. I think Minnesota should get that game by a touchdown, hopefully more.
All right, Jules, appreciate you, man. All of you watching right now, do not forget, if you want more guidance throughout the college football season, we got you covered. You can subscribe to VSiN Pro for VSiN's college football guide. So head over to VSiN, subscribe, enjoy all of their expert knowledge. Our experts here in studio will deliver on 3 NFL division previews coming up. While the 49ers could be on upset alert in the NFC West, but first, which MLB teams are closing in on their preseason win totals and the guy Steve is targeting in the props department on today's slate? Hey, welcome back to The Sweat, everybody, presented by DraftKings. I'm Emerson Lotzi. This man is Steve Buchanan, one of our baseball guys here at the DK offices. So we are going to tell you coming up why this postseason is likely to have its strangest look since the 3-division alignment was adopted. That was
Totally.
back in 1995. That was the same year Toy Story hit screens. Yeah, theaters.
The original.
The original, the
Wow.
OG, bro. Woody and Buzz, all those fun characters. Anywho, let's go some MLB over under right now, because I want to break down which teams are heading towards their win totals, and also we'll touch on some best sportsbook plays on today's slate. So start me here with the Nationals.
Yeah.
Man. This is a team not in the wild card hunt, but could still make better some money, huh?
Yeah, I mean, they are just one win away from hitting the over on their season total, which is pretty incredible when you think, it's August 27th. They could hit the win total on this one. They'd be one of the first teams to do so. I think they'd be either the third or fourth team to do it so far this season. And they've actually leapfrogged the Mets in the standings, too, as well. Like, the Mets are in dead last in the NL East, not the Nationals anymore. But it's incredible because this team has gone 24-13 since the All-Star break, and they still don't really have anything to show for it. And it's unfortunate, too, to go on that type of run and still be 7 games out of a wild card spot. They're not completely out of it yet. They still have to leapfrog 4 other teams to get there, but at least at the pace that they're playing some really good baseball in the second half.
Yeah, plus 145 on the money line against and in Miami today.
Yeah.
And speaking of the Marlins, another team like in the hunt right now. How are we looking at their preseason win total?
Yeah, another team that's been really surprising, especially in that juggernaut of a division in the NL East here. They're 12 games to go over their total. They have 32 games left on the season. They're still also in the wild card hunt, but they've gone 2-8 over their last 10 games and are currently on a 3-game losing streak. It's actually kind of amazing that this team has been as good as they are, because if you look at their run differential for the season, they have a negative 49 run differential. That gives them an expected win-loss record of 60-70. So they've definitely been lucky a lot of times this season to have that type of record and to only be 3 games out of the wild card spot right now. When all said and done, I don't think this team is going to make it, but they have certainly surpassed any expectations, and they were buyers at the deadline, any expectations that anybody had of this team for this season.
Okay, so the Red Sox, I believe, around 3.5 games out of the wild card.
3.
How about this, Steve? Right now, no Yankees, no Cardinals, possibly no Red Sox. The last postseason that did not feature any of those 3 perennial contenders was 1993, when only winners of the 4 divisions qualified. So how are the Red Sox sitting right now with their win total?
Yeah, they're in the driver's seat to hit the total on the over on their win total as well, which was at 77.5. You could have got it at 78.5. This number kind of fluctuated all throughout the offseason here, but regardless of where you got it at, you're in a good position to cash here, with still over a month left in this season. Despite that, though, like you mentioned here, they're still chasing a playoff spot right now, and the wild card has gotten really interesting too, because Seattle has moved into first place, so now Texas and Houston are in a wild card spot right now too as well. And we were expecting in the beginning of the year that this was going to be an AL East dominated wild card standings. It has been anything but that so far. We'll touch on the Rays here in just a second, but if you have a ticket to go over the Red Sox win total for a team that maybe was going to be a 500 club, they have played better than that. They have been scuffling a little bit as of late. They have played the Houston Astros and the Dodgers, but you're in a really good spot to hit the over on that win total thus far.
Well, let's get to the Rays right now, because you would think with that historic start to the year, hitting the over on their win total wasn't going to be a problem at all. But this team got chewed up by injury, especially that starting rotation, right? So we are currently sitting at 79. 88.5 was the preseason win total. How do we feel about them hitting the over here?
Yeah, I mean, they're still going to hit it here, but here's the incredible part. On June 15th, the Rays won their 50th game of the year. They had a record of 50-22 when that happened. Since then, they have been a below 500 team. They have gone 29-30 since June 15th and are currently 79-52 on the season. Like you mentioned, they've lost some key players here. Shane McClanahan gone for the year, obviously having Tommy John surgery. Their shortstop, we'll leave that for another time there. He's obviously not in the mix either as well. But, like you mentioned, they only need a few more wins here to go over the over on their total. But to think that how much of a juggernaut team this was, and now we're heading into September, and there's still, at least a few games away to hit that over. It's incredible how much this team has slid, really, since the midway point in June.
Because the team they're chasing, the Orioles, I believe, was the first team to hit its preseason win total.
Yes,
right?
they did that a couple of days ago.
And you got to be aware of some of these teams like the Rays. We're looking at the record; it's great, but like these teams that are backing into the postseason, something to be aware of for your playoff
Absolutely.
bets. All right, team you like to win today. among these teams we just discussed.
Yeah, I don't really like any of those guys on the
Great.
money line here today. So we're going to go a little bit different. We're going to go with an underdog here. We're going to go with the Oakland Athletics going up against the Chicago White Sox.
Whoa.
I don't know if there's ever been a time where I said I like the Oakland Athletics on a particular day, but they have Paul Blackburn going on the mound today against the White Sox, going up against Mike Clevenger. He has been phenomenal in the second half, and obviously no one really pays attention to this team, but 3.24 ERA, 320 WOBA during the second half of the season. The A's have a shot to win this 4-game series. They have not won many series all throughout the year, but they're averaging 7.3 runs through the first 3 games of the season. Mike Clevenger has not pitched well this season at all, really struggled with his command. I think this is a sneaky spot to back the underdog Oakland Athletics here this afternoon.
And I believe they're the only team in Major League Baseball currently eliminated from the postseason.
Oh, they've been
picture.
eliminated for weeks.
We know that, but it's officially
Yes, officially.
official, and that was like middle of August. Unbelievably bad stuff we're seeing out in Oakland. Player prop, who are you targeting?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Noah Syndergaard. I'm going to take under his out total at 16.5. So we're going to take the under on this one at -115. He's going up against the Toronto Blue Jays. This is going to be the second time that he's faced the Toronto Blue Jays this season. He puts a lot of men on base in that start. 6 hits and 2 watts to 5 2/3 innings. Literally, he just needs to go over the number that he pitched the last time out, but he throws so many pitches in these starts that his pitch count goes up so high early in these ones, like in that game that he faced against Toronto, 5 2/3 innings in that one, 93 pitches. If he gets into early trouble in this game, which I think could be very plausible with that Toronto offense, I think he's out of this game early, so give me under 16.5 outs recorded by Noah Syndergaard today.
Do you remember 2 summers ago we were in LA for the All-Star festivities?
Yes.
We saw Noah Syndergaard there, how large he is in person, and he's standing next to like a couple Clydesdales, and the dude is just towering over them.
I don't know if we needed to discuss that story, but yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind you.
Thank you.
DFS pitcher, as we go to the land of fantasy right now.
Yeah.
Who sits atop your DFS pitching rankings today?
So on the other side of that game, we have Yusei Kikuchi going up against the Guardians. The Guardians cannot hit left-handed pitching at all. If you look at the WOBA for the expected lineup that the Guardians are going to roll out today, the best guy on that team is Ramon Laureano, who wasn't even with this team a couple of weeks ago. His WOBA against lefties is only a 348, so we're not talking about someone that really crushes lefties either. But he's also striking out a ton. He has nearly a 30% K rate against lefties on the year. Kikuchi already pinched against the Guardians team earlier this month, allowed just 1 run on 3 hits with 6 strikeouts in that game. I think this is a really strong spot to back him once again going up against his Guardians team. He has been phenomenal for the Blue Jays. In that last start he made, he gave up 3 runs. Before that, I think it was 6 straight games where he gave up exactly 1 run. He has been a savior for that Blue Jays rotation. I think he keeps it rolling here today against the Guardians.
Well, give me a dude swinging good wood right now, a DFS hitter you like.
Yeah, over on the Phillies, Alec Baum going up against Drew Rom of the Cardinals. Against lefties, Baum has a 392 WOBA on the year. You look at Drew Rom, who came in that trade with the Orioles for Jack Flaherty. He got absolutely dismantled in his first start of the season, and it was against the Pittsburgh Pirates, who have twice been getting no hit in the past couple of weeks. One of them was against Dallas Keuchel, who is one of the worst pitchers in Major League Baseball. He gave up 8 runs on 8 hits through just 3 2/3 innings against that offense, an offense that really has nobody you fear in that one. Now facing a completely different team in the Phillies here. Didn't have great numbers in the minors when he was with the when he was with the Orioles and the Cardinals. I think it's another rough start for him today, so give me Alec Baum going up against the Pirates today.
And looking at game totals here on the DK Sportsbook, only one of 2 sitting currently above 9, Dodgers and Red Sox. We saw the Red Sox get a big win over the Dodgers yesterday at Fenway, so this is the rubber match here going down in Boston, 1:35 Eastern time. Which side of that total would you sit on?
Yeah, I would be going over on that game too as well. We saw like yesterday how both of these teams can put up some crooked numbers at any given time. The Red Sox are a good hitting club against lefties too as well, going up against Caleb Ferguson. So I think that's taking the over in this game here. Tanner Houck is making his start today too as well, and going up against a very tough offense too. And they're just going to absolutely load up on lefties. That has been the kryptonite for Tanner Houck all throughout the year. That Dodgers lineup can really go heavy on lefties. I would not be surprised if they have 6 or first 7 lefties in that lineup this afternoon at 1:35 Eastern. So I think going over 9.5 runs, you're getting that at minus 118 on DraftKings Sportsbook. I think that would be the play to take in that game.
Is your absolute favorite bet here? We have less than a minute to go in this segment. Is your absolute favorite bet something we did not talk about?
Yeah, we talked about this yesterday on the show. I'm going to go right back to the Orioles on the run line, minus 1.5 going against the Rockies. They are literally one of the worst offenses on the road, going up against their recent acquisition of Jack Flaherty from the Cardinals. He has been pitching really well for the Orioles here. Again, going up against the Rockies on the road where they do not hit well. I think Flaherty is the guy to back, minus 1.5 on the run line for the Orioles.
All right, nice work, homie. I need you to buckle up because we've got not one, not two, but 3 NFL division previews to get to in this show. We will start with the NFC West. What are the chances Seattle soars into first place, dethroning the 49ers? Jules and Steve break down the odds after this.
We'll let them know.
Welcome back, everybody, to our newly launched edition of The Sweat, presented by DraftKings, now airing on DraftKings Network and VSiN every Saturday and Sunday morning, 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock Eastern Time. Let's now turn our attention back to our NFL division preview. Steve Buchanan is here. Julian Edlow has returned as well. The NFC West, Steven, appears to be the 49ers to lose and the Seahawks to take. So, when this team is 100% healthy, it's a big if here. A lot of people look at them as the best team equipped to prevent the Eagles from advancing to their second straight Super Bowl. How do we feel about their division odds right now, and what would prevent them from winning it?
Yeah, I mean, look, their division odds are fair. I mean, you look at the other teams here, like, no one really stands out. I think Seattle's going to be due for some regression this year. Like, I'm not crazy about them last year. What we saw from their quarterback play and everything, I feel like was above what we normally see. What worries me the most about San Francisco is a couple things. It's the health of Brock Purdy, because then you'd have to go to Sam Darnold if not, and how that offensive line is going to stand. That's going to be a big problem for them last year. When Purdy was under pressure, he was under pressure 32% of his dropbacks last year. In that scenario, completed only 51 of his pass attempts and 5.8 yards per attempt. You know, if you're getting him under pressure, especially with everything that he's gone through over the past year or so, that worries me a lot too. And with no more Trey Lance, now it's going to go to Sam Darnold. Like, how would you feel if the 49ers are being led by Sam Darnold? I wouldn't feel, very confident about that team. But as it's said right now, with the roster that we have in play, yes, this is definitely San Francisco's to lose, but I think people are still putting a lot of stock into Seattle. But I think there's going to be a lot of regression coming from Seattle this year.
And we'll talk with Ross Tucker coming up in this show about Trey Lance being shipped off to Dallas. Jules, how confident would you be right now betting San Francisco to win this division?
Very confident. One of the first plays that I put out in article form back in June was the Niners at minus 150 to take the division. It's gone up a little bit. I still think DraftKings has a fantastic price on it. And like Steve said, what if you have to rely on Sam Darnold? What if Brock Purdy is under pressure? Maybe you worry more about the win total. I don't worry as much about them still winning this division. The 49ers showed last year that they can still win games with huge question marks at quarterback, and it eventually got to the point in the NFC Championship game where they were down so many quarterbacks against a team that was so good that they could not compete. But in terms of going up against the rest of this division, going up against some of the games that they have on the schedule, I still think even with quarterbacks maybe going in and out, and some question marks there, that they are worth laying juice on to take this division, because I think Seattle should regress. They snuck up on people last year. They shouldn't now. And these might be the two worst teams in football.
And just real quick, too, if it does end up getting to Darnold, he is even worse under pressure, too. You remember his time with the Jets and all the offensive line issues they were having and how he played then, too. Exactly. But truly, like, he does not play well under pressure either. So getting to Darnold with that offensive line, I think that would really spell disaster for the 49ers.
All right, so you both expect regression out of Seattle.
Yeah.
Like, I guess where that would come from then is most likely the quarterback position, no? Because, Jules, I know they still have some work to do defensively to become division winners, but it feels like a lot of this is riding now on Geno Smith.
Yeah, and they sneak into the playoffs last year. The NFC gets even worse, arguably, this year. They should probably be back. You see right there, they're at minus 120. But this team far exceeded expectations last year, and they're sitting at 9-8, and now we're going to boost the win total up. We're expecting them to improve now, and I understand they get some layups on the schedule based on the division, but they should, in theory, be playing a more difficult schedule now that they have elevated. I don't see them getting to double-digit wins. This would be an under on the win total for me, which is always a little painful when you're playing it in such a poor division. If you told me they went 4-0 against the Rams and Cardinals, I'd buy it. Now you're looking for 6 other wins. I still don't see it with this team. I think the tape on Geno Smith, some regression. The rest of the roster, some regression, and they don't get to double-digit wins.
Steve, we saw the results Pete Carroll got out of his draft class in 2022, and they just added 2 more first-round talents here. But you still expect regression.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Geno Smith numbers from last year, too. He had like a 77% adjusted completion percentage on his year. That is so far above and beyond what we've seen from him throughout his career. So I just don't, kind of like what Julian was mentioning here, too, I just think there is going to be a lot of regression coming from this team here. I think teams are going to get that tape on Geno Smith, start to figure him out, get to him more efficiently than they did last year. So, for them to make the playoffs at minus 120, I don't like those odds there. I don't think it's that much of a shoo-in that this team gets in, despite that division being as poor as it is.
All right, so the Rams, that Super Bowl hangover last season was legit.
Yeah.
Some believe, though, they could be a tougher out than many expect this season because it's hard to ignore the group of elite players returning for him. Cooper Kupp, Aaron Donald, top 5 players at their positions, Steve.
Yeah, so I'm like, if you're going to ask me to who would I take a bet on to make the playoffs, like Seattle or the Rams, I'd much rather take the Rams here at plus 310. I think you're getting some decent value here. Like, I know this team was so poor last year, going 5-12, but injuries were a huge part of that too. Right now, they're fully healthy. They got Cooper Kupp back in the mix. Now they're going to have to rely upon more of, Van Jefferson, Tutu Atwell at receiver. What are those guys going to bring if they're getting more consistent play time? Both of those guys can get downfield, and if we see Stafford start to sling it again, then maybe we start getting there, and maybe this Rams is a better team. Obviously, the biggest downfall for them is going to be their defense. Their defense is going to be absolutely putrid. They're going to be in these games that are, going to be very high scoring, 50-plus points. I would not be surprised about on a nearly consistent basis. But I think the Rams are a little bit better than people are giving them credit for. So, again, in a division that's pretty wide open after the 49ers, plus 310 to make the playoffs. I'm not thrilled about it, but I think you're getting a lot better value here than taking the Seattle Seahawks at minus 120.
Jules, do you believe there are still too many holes to patch to bet the Rams to win the division?
Yes, Steve and I are completely opposite on the Rams. I think that the Rams are going to be one of the worst teams in football and maybe even get worse than that 5-12 record that they had. Matt Stafford's elbow is hanging on by a thread at this point. So the way, rather than just fading the Rams at this point, I'm fading Stafford. His passing yardage opened at 3,800 on DraftKings. It's been bet down to 3,700. I put an article out on DK Network writing up why I like the under on that. I think that the injury is still a big deal. I think that Steve talked about the defense having holes. I think that the offensive line is a massive, detriment to Matt Stafford's health, keeping him in there.
There was a lot of injuries on them as well last year.
They were, but they still have guys that are fighting for jobs that are not considered starters, and they're going to wind up starting some backup level talent there. So I think they're not going to be able to protect the quarterback, and outside of Cooper Kupp, don't have much on offense. And then that defense outside of Donald, again, they have these big names, but the rest of the guys that are going to be out there playing are not going to be able to do much. I think the Rams are really going to struggle this year.
I don't think anybody has lower expectations for the Cardinals out there than Julian Edlow. You've been very vocal about that on this show yesterday, already this morning. How long of a year is it going to be for first-year head coach Jonathan Gannon in the desert?
A very long year. If you're looking at this plus 1,100 to make the playoffs, just call me. I'll get you. I'll take a better number. This is under 4.5 for me. I hadn't bet this until last week, to be honest, but the Cardinals showed us their hand last week when they essentially said, any starter level player that you think might have upside that you want, we will give you for mid-round draft picks. Please come and take them. And they trade 3 potential starters in one day. It leaks that Kyler Murray, recovering from the ACL, might not come back to play this season. They might as well just rest him, get him healthy for the following season, which puts, I don't know why they're not going to roll the dice on a younger quarterback. They're going to give it to Colt McCoy and see what happens. I just could not be lower on this team because I think that they are telling us that they do not care about having talent on the roster and will go out of their way to give teams, we'll see when the trade deadline comes, hey, a Budda Baker or this guy, that guy, will fill your injuries, give us more mid-level draft picks. I think this team is going to really struggle to compete on a weekly basis, and we see that with how large of an underdog they are against a poor Commanders team in week 1.
Dukes, who even is fantasy relevant on this team?
There are actually a couple guys, and it actually brings me to a bet that I do like on this team. It's either Marquise Brown or James Conner to have at least 1,250 yards from scrimmage on the year, getting that at plus 175. Marquise Brown is going to get the lion's share of targets in this offense, whoever it's from at this point, if it's Colt McCoy, if Kyler Murray does end up playing. And you look at James Conner, too. I mean, the last 2 seasons, he was pretty close to this number, 1,127 in 2021, 1,082 in 2000 and last year. So I think, especially with this team playing from behind, probably almost all the time, it's something to
Checkdowns.
consider too, and especially with Marquise Brown. You remember DeAndre Hopkins missed the first 6 weeks of the season when he was out on suspension. Brown averaged 10.6 targets per game when he was out with Hopkins. Now Hopkins is obviously gone for the entire season because he's now with the Titans. So I think one of those guys can hit that number, get that over a plus 175.
All right, very quickly, less than a minute to go in segment. Plus 1,000, 49ers Super Bowl champion. Yay or nay, Jules?
I think the 49ers are worth a look in the NFC just because of how weak the entire conference is. Somebody's got to win it. They're in a revenge spot from last season.
I'm going to go nay on that. I think that offensive line's really going to give them trouble.
All right, we've got an AFC South preview. Home of America's team, the Jacksonville Jaguars, coming up. NFC South. Ross Tucker will join the show with his most overrated NFL teams and Tour Championship best bets with Jeff Ulrich. That is coming up when the second hour of the Sweat presented by DraftKings kicks off. Back here on The Sweat, presented by DraftKings. Ladies and gentlemen, coming to you now live on DraftKings Network and VSiN, all of our DraftKings social channels, Saturday, Sunday mornings, 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock Eastern Time. I'll be here, Emerson Latzia, for the most part, Steve Buchanan. Julian Edlow, Josh Applebaum will join us in a few weeks when he gets back from his 3-month honeymoon. So far, we've tackled best bets for today, which teams to target, and college football futures. Tons of DFS and best ball advice dished out as well. We just touched on the NFC West as our NFL division previews continue. And now we will turn our focus to the AFC South, the division of the working man, home of America's team, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Who, by the way, gentlemen, favored in this division. They are the favorites. Steve Buchanan. How much do you believe they will repeat here? They have stolen this crown. Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson are here to stay.
Yeah, I mean, they have the third best odds in the league to win their division behind the Niners and the Chiefs at this point. But if we get anything close to what we saw from Trevor Lawrence after Week 9 last year, I mean, there's just no telling how good this team can be, especially when you add the offensive prowess of Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, man.
In that division, if the Titans are the biggest quote-unquote threat at plus 350, I feel like the Jags are in a really good spot here at this point. When you look at the strength of schedule, too, Jacksonville is ranked 12th, and they still have a projected win total of 9.5. The Titans actually have an easier schedule, but only a projected win total of 7.5 at this point. So obviously they made the big splash here near the end of free agency. They brought in DeAndre Hopkins, but what's the quarterback play going to look like? That's the biggest question mark for me, whether it's Ryan Tannehill, Levis, Malik Willis, whatever they end up having here. Jacksonville is by far the most complete team in that division. I think they absolutely repeat.
Yeah, a lot of people look at the Titans, Jules. They say, okay, Mike Vrabel's the head coach, but he's the head coach of a mediocre football team. The Jaguars on paper, not a mediocre football team. This offense looks absolutely crispy, a young up-and-coming defense as well. Would you go over their win total?
I would not go over their win total. I like them much more to win the division than their win total, but I mean, they tie in, obviously, very winnable games in that division. I want to go against the Jags, to be honest. I want to find a way to fade them. There's all the hype, and it would also make me happy to fade your team, Emerson, but it's just too difficult with the other options in this division. I guess if you gave me a free bet and said you have to bet the division, I would probably put it on Tennessee to somehow get in there and surprise, but it's not a bettable division in my mind. This is still the Jacksonville Jaguars. They could certainly find a way to regress.
What does that mean?
It means that they stink year after year and caught lightning in a bottle down the stretch last year.
You really consider that what we witnessed last year in Jacksonville, catching lightning in a bottle? It looked like a team that finally came together with all the pieces that they've had.
Yeah,
and now you add Calvin Ridley, and the defense is even more experienced.
I will give you a pro-Jags bet because I am betting something pro-Jags. I will buy the Calvin Ridley hype. Calvin Ridley plus 120 over 6.5 touchdowns. Every year that he played with Atlanta, he had 9+. So if he's going to be a red zone threat, I think that getting over 6.5, getting 7 touchdowns is something that he's done every season that he's played healthy.
Okay, Jules, so the Jags add Calvin Ridley. The Titans add DeAndre Hopkins. So that will be a welcome boost to a passing game that really needs an influx of talent here. By far their weakest position. They do have an aging quarterback, as Steve has mentioned, a running back in Derrick Henry closing in on his 30th birthday at defense with questions. Not just at one level or two levels, but all 3 levels. What would be your bet here with them?
I just gave you a wide receiver over. I'll give you a wide receiver under. I'm not going to buy into DeAndre Hopkins under 850 receiving yards, 850.5 for DeAndre Hopkins. He hasn't been on the field for a full season that many times recently. And when we have seen him out there, he's regressed. And now you're going into that Tennessee offense where I think even more regression is due. You remember Tennessee's brought in some names. They brought in Julio Jones. That did not work at all. So I kind of see this as a Julio Jones 2 years ago type of acquisition where Hopkins helps open things up on the field a little bit, but in terms of him getting over 850 yards, I don't see that happening. And it could also be a carousel of quarterbacks throwing him the ball. We still have to see what Tannehill is. Yeah. I will give Tennessee credit for this. More teams in the NFL should do this. Malik Willis slides down the draft boards. They try him out. Will Levis slides down draft boards. They try him out. don't say, oh, we took Willis last year. We're not gonna roll the dice on Levis. More teams should be, casting a wider net, take more quarterbacks, and see if one sticks, because we know most of them are busts. So try more guys. I'll give him credit for that. But if we're gonna be rotating through all those quarterbacks, I don't see DeAndre Hopkins getting there if he can even stay healthy.
And Levis just landed that mayonnaise deal as well, because
Huge for him.
Yeah, that is huge
What?
for all mayonnaise lovers.
He
Yeah,
has a lifetime
everyone-
deal with mayonnaise because he puts mayo in his coffee, which is absolutely
Yes.
insane and makes me not want to drink coffee.
Which maybe we'll try that out here on the show next week. You
No.
will. I look
Steve
forward
has
to that.
experience eating hot wings on a segment, so I think Steve's the guy to have the mayo coffee.
I mean, Ryan Tannehill, Steve, can get you to the playoffs, but really, like,
Can he?
I don't know. How much further? Is Levis, Mr. Mayonnaise, or Malik Willis the solution there?
Just keep calling him
so-
Mr. Mayo. I like that.
I mean, to go off your question there, like I think the bet in this that involves the Titans is taking the under on Tannehill's passing yards instead of 3,075.5. I mean, there's a couple of reasons I like this one. Like that offensive line has a lot of questions that we're worried about. Tannehill was under pressure 37% of his dropbacks last year. He's getting up there in age. He's going to be 35 years old. I think he recently just had a birthday last month. And then two quarterbacks waiting in the wings, whether it's Malik Willis, whether it's Will Levis. It wouldn't shock anyone at this point if one of those two guys is starting under center at some point this season. Like, this kind of goes back to what I was talking about with Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, there's just so many injury concerns with Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm not convinced that he's going to be there all season long. I think we can say the same for Ryan Tannehill, especially with the draft capital that they put into these quarterbacks over the past couple of years. Tannehill getting up there in age. So if you're telling me he's going to go over that passing prop, like that would mean that a lot of things went right for the Titans, and I don't think that's going to be the case this year. So give me under his passing yards for this season.
Well, this is expected to be the worst division in football, despite the Jaguars being in it, because you have teams like the Colts and you have teams like the Texans as well. And the Colts really don't know what they have with Anthony Richardson. He has been named the starter. Gardner Minshew will start the season as the backup. So, Steve, how difficult is it really to predict what we're going to see with the Colts and how that impacts your approach on the DK Sportsbook?
Yeah, I mean, are we really thinking that this team is going to, be 3 wins better than they were last year? I mean, sure, Richardson in the future is probably going to bring this team up, but
who's he handing the football off to?
Right, exactly. When it comes to this year, like if you're getting especially even money on the under, like that's where I'm taking for this Colts team this year. They actually have one of the easiest strength of schedules on the schedule, but I think they're still going to be really hard pressed to find success. That secondary that they're going to be rolling out there, people are going to be picking on that team all year long when it comes to, overs on receiving yards for other teams. They no longer have Stephon Gilmore. They no longer have Duke Shelley, 2 guys on 2 different teams this year. So I think this team is really going to struggle. They also did not get a lot of pressure on the quarterback last year. I don't think that's going to be something they're going to find success with this year either. So you're telling me that this team's going to have 3 more wins than they did last year? I don't think that's going to be the case. I think taking the under on them at even money too, I think that's the play, under 6.5 wins.
Jules, is there anyone you even like in DFS on this Colts roster in fantasy?
I like Anthony Richardson because he's a stud. He's going to run, and he's going to keep throwing deep balls. He's not going to complete many of them. He's going to throw a lot of interceptions, but he's going to keep throwing them, and that's what we want in DFS. And he's not afraid to use his legs. He's been out there running around in preseason when it doesn't even matter. So, freak athlete for Richardson. I think that they might be making a mistake, Indy, by throwing him into the fire right away when he has very minimal college experience. And
he didn't look great in the SEC, and that's supposed to be the best football conference on the planet.
He's a great athlete, but I think that he needs some seasoning. I spoke about him on yesterday's show. We talked about what's your favorite league leader bet. Anthony Richardson to lead the league in interceptions at 18-1 because they're not going to bench him. They gave him the job. You're gonna go with it, but he's going to make mistakes. My favorite bet I am holding out hope for is that we get a Jonathan Taylor over/under in terms of rushing yards because they're not going to be able to trade him. They said we're not going to pay you, but then when it comes time to trade him, you ask for a first-round pick, which is ridiculous. You're contradicting yourself. So when they are unable to trade him and he comes back, if we can get a number on Jonathan Taylor once he kind of says, okay, I'll start the season, that's what I would want to bet the under on because it's going to be he's going to be not happy about being there, and this team's going to be trailing in games, not looking to run the football.
And Bukes, we got another rookie quarterback under center for the lowly Texans,
Yeah.
C.J. Stroud here. How quick of a turnaround do you expect under first-year head coach D'Amico Ryans? Anything look enticing to you on the DK Sportsbook?
Yeah, I think actually going over his touchdown prop of 17.5 at even money is something to take a look at here. I mean, the Texans are dogs in 14 of the 17 games that are listed on DraftKings Sportsbook right now. And you look at their new offensive coordinator, and Bobby Slowick, he worked with some of the young quarterbacks over in San Francisco. Trey Lance and Brock Purdy is who we worked with. How did I get Trey Young out of that? That was really odd.
I don't know.
But going
Should
over
have a good year for the Hawks. Make a lot of 3-pointers.
but going over his touchdown prop of 17.5 with how much the Texans are going to be playing from behind, and obviously them trusting Stroud to take the ball on day one here, I think that's a number that he can go over at even money.
Do you have any bets you like for the Texans?
I haven't bet anything. If I did bet something, I would just go under the 6.5 with them. I don't disagree with Steve's Colts under 6.5. I think both of them probably go under 6.5, but somebody has to win these divisional matchups. But like the Colts, Houston was even a little worse. They had 3 wins and a tie last year, so they have to improve even more to get up to 7 wins. I don't quite see how that happens. I like C.J. Stroud, but again, I don't know if these guys are ready to go right away for these poor teams. Somebody has to win some of these divisional matchups again going head-to-head, but the rest of the schedule, I don't see many wins there. And I think that Stroud, when you look at those receivers, is going to struggle.
Would you prefer Stroud over Richardson?
At this point, yes. I think actually the Texans have the better receivers too, especially Nico Collins. I think he's going to take a step up this year.
Tank Dell, that's your value
Tank
receiver
Dell.
right there.
Yep.
Good
C.J.
stuff.
Stroud loves him.
All right, we'll talk some more football. We'll preview the NFC South. Ross Tucker will join us to tell us his most overrated football teams entering this season. But first, how about some PGA Tour best bets? Final round of the Tour Championship going down at East Lake in Atlanta. Jeff Ulrich joins us next. Who to back on the DK Sportsbook? All right, what was once a close tournament quickly turned into a blowouts on Saturday at the Tour Championship. Like once the weather-delayed round concluded, Viktor Hovland opened up a healthy 6-shot lead on the field. He's going for his second consecutive victory, first Tour Championship, first FedEx Cup. Let's get some PGA Tour best bets from my guy, DraftKings contributor Jeff Ulrich. Good morning. It is great to see you, my Canadian kumquat. Let's react real quick to what went down yesterday. He's an absolute freight train, Viktor Hovland. Can anybody stop this dude?
Probably not. No, I mean, it really looks like right now what we've got is that situation where it's kind of like you've got this one guy who's just, ready to go. He's pumped up. He's just playing on this other level. Everyone else is just kind of done. They're just ready for the season to be over. I mean, Colin Morikawa put up a great fight for the first couple rounds, but like asking a guy to shoot 64 every day just to make up like the 9-stroke differential is a little too much. Viktor Hovland got off to a little bit of a slow start, but like the last 2 days, I mean, he's just been so clearly head and shoulders above the field. Takes something insane to happen. I mean, look, it's a tough golf course. There's some water out there. Things happen. I mean, Martin Kaymer once blew a 10-stroke lead over on the Euro Tour, but Viktor Hovland is in his prime. And I just don't think that the other guys have that dog in them right now. I just don't think anyone is up for this fight. I think that's the biggest thing. So I know there's a lot of money at stake, but this is probably going to be a walk in the park, for being honest.
Jeff, he has shot 10 consecutive rounds in the 60s. He's on another planet right now. I know you mentioned Martin Kaymer coughing up a 10-stroke lead at one point. Let's not forget Scheffler had a 6-stroke lead, like in this position, entering the final round last year. Rory McIlroy ended up claiming the Tour Championship. How do you feel about Xander Schauffele's chances here? I think we find him about 6 strokes back, right?
Yeah, look, and you know what? The thing is, it is worth talking about. I mean, Schauffele has done it before. Like, he has come back and erased huge deficits. I remember at the Tour Championship one season, he did it. I mean, he came in, he shot like a 62 in the last round, and he won. I mean, he came back in dramatic fashion. So I just like that. To me, like from a betting perspective, the plus 1100 probably isn't enough. I would really think like I would want something plus 15, plus 1800 to take on a player like Vic. We're not talking like a player that's come out of the blue here and just put in 3 great rounds. We saw Viktor Hovland put in like basically the best round of the season last week. And now we're being asked to bet against him with a 6-stroke lead. It's not really the situation I want. If it was a more shaky leader, a guy who hadn't won all year, yeah, sure, I would definitely be up for this. But again, plus 1100, not really the number that I want, and also just not the player that I want to go up against right now. So yes, Scotty Scheffler last year, admittedly, that was I was surprised that happened. But clearly something in his game, as we've seen this year with his putter, it's not right. I mean, he's just not like putting at anything near an elite rate. So that kind of makes sense now. But Viktor Hovland doesn't really have that deficit. I guess the short game woes could show up again for Vic, but I just don't think that that's going to happen. Again, if it's going to be anyone, it's going to be Schauffele. He's got a fantastic record of this course. He loves East Lake. Once again, I mean, the guy has vaulted himself into the top 5 of this event. It's actually just an insane record when you think about it. He probably has made more money at this event than most tour pros make over a lifetime. So shout out to Xander. I just don't think that it's going to happen this week, but certainly if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be him.
And shout out to you, because yesterday we said, okay, Viktor Hovland, Colin Morikawa entering the 3rd round, like head to head here. You said, okay, at this time last year, I would have gone Colin Morikawa, but no, it's Viktor Hovland because of just the year that Colin Morikawa has had. It was pretty obvious that it was going to be tough for him to put this together for 4 rounds and repeat what we saw on Thursday and Friday. But right now, winner without starting strokes, Viktor Hovland plus 200, Colin Morikawa plus 200, Xander right behind him at plus 380, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, and this one's really interesting. I would be, again, like I don't think that taking Viktor Hovland here is a bad idea, but you do have to obviously factor in, like, if we're going without starting strokes, Viktor Hovland down the stretch here may just let a shot or two go. I mean, if he's coming into the last 4 holes and he's got like a 7-stroke lead, I mean, he may just play that par 5 in 7 strokes just because he can, right? Like just so he can take the water out of play or just make it easy on himself. So keep that in mind. I kind of like Xander Schauffele here at plus 380, if we're being honest. Again, I mean, you look at the where he's at. I mean, obviously looking at about 11 under par to start. I mean, he's basically going to be, one shot behind to start, which I like. I mean, again, we're talking about winner without starting strokes here. He's the closest. He's the guy who's chasing, who's probably going to be realistically have the most realistic shot in his mind. So plus 380, I really do not mind that price at all. Not sure how much deeper you necessarily want to go, like in a market like that. But certainly Xander Schauffele would be the guy I'd kind of be looking at there. I think he's got the right kind of mentality. He's got a fantastic record on East Lake as well, we know. So yeah, Xander Schauffele without the starting strokes, it would be a bet there. I think plus 380 is a fair number for him.
This one could be a little more competitive, Jeff. What about winner without Hovland, and it includes the starting strokes? This is where it becomes a little more cluttered. Maybe there's some more options. Xander Schauffele plus 135. Colin Morikawa's there, then Keegan Bradley. And let's not forget Scotty Scheffler, who, I don't know, maybe end up making some putts, Jeff?
Yeah, I actually kind of like Scheffler in this one. I mean, it feels like finally we're kind of just getting like a decent number on Scotty Scheffler. Plus 800 here. I mean, again, you look at this starting leaderboard. I mean, remember, we're taking Victor Hovland out of the equation. Yes, Schauffele's at minus 14. But then you've got a couple, you've got Keegan Bradley. Morikawa was a little bit shaky last week. Is he out of gas? If someone's going to bounce back and just put up what you'd call a saving face performance today, it's going to be Scotty Scheffler. Yes, the putting has been terrible again, as I made note of yesterday again. But, again, we're talking about one round here, and we're talking about a guy who's the number one player in the world, wants to go out there and save some face. This is right now, Scotty Scheffler's in the worst position, I think, ever for a guy who started first in this event. If he finished where he finished, if he finishes where he's right now at T5, that's going to be it. He does not want to have that moniker of, oh, I'm the only guy who started in first and finished outside the top 5. So I think Scotty Scheffler actually brings it today. Again, I'm not picking him to win or make up the 9-stroke deficit, but winner without starting strokes plus 800. Let's not forget that this dude still gains strokes at an elite rate, not an elite rate, an absolutely historic rate, tee to green. So plus 800, I think is fair. Again, it's not that big a deficit between him and Schauffele, and there's not much in between them as well.
Other bets for round 4 today, final round of the PGA Tour season. What stands out to you in the matchups department? Is there anything there? You gave us some good ones yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I actually did give you a good one, but
I was trying to give you credit.
No, it's okay. I mean, I made some good calls. We faded Taylor Moore again, which was very just simple. Here's one that I don't mind. I mean, Tony Finau's taken on Tom Kim. Finau's putter hasn't been great either, but tee to green, he's been very strong. Tom Kim, still his first time playing this event. He really has not been strong in the final rounds in the last couple playoff events. I think Finau minus 105, is the slight underdog here. I would have this line switched if I'm being dead honest. I think Finau's the veteran. He's played this event before. There's no real, not huge issues with his game. His putter, like Scotty Scheffler, could show up. Just a little bit of a saving grace performance for him today. I kind of like that just as the underdog. And realistically, I mentioned Taylor Moore. I'm not sure what's wrong with Taylor Moore right now, but there's an injury concern or his game is just completely he's lost confidence in some part of his game, but he's playing terrible. And Emiliano Grillo at minus 140, he shot around even par yesterday, but Grillo can move up a couple spots here. And I think I'd rather back the veteran here. The guy who's played East Lake knows that there's a lot of money online right now. And he's not going to have a problem just kind of showing up. I think there's something more deeper wrong with Taylor Moore here. So, yeah, we got to pay the juice. But, you should be looking for ways to fade Taylor Moore at this point. Because, again, I think this is a player who's just playing through something simply for the fact that there's just too much money at stake for him not to take the week off. So, Grillo at minus 140. It's kind of an ugly number. Maybe throw it in a parlay or something. But I just wanted to point that out as well.
Yeah, Jeff, a lot of money at stake for sure. $18 million going to the winner. What about Ryder Cup implications here? What's at stake today? Because I believe you got to have the rosters finalized this upcoming week.
Yeah, I think it's very soon after this.
Maybe
round
Monday or
finished.
Tuesday, yes.
Yeah, Monday or Tuesday, yeah, something like that.
We have 1 minute to go, Jeff. 1 minute to go.
Okay, good. So this will be our last thing we talk about then. But I did want to mention quickly, Sung J M is another guy. Like if you're looking at low round scores or like round scores, I like the under on Sung J. Played well yesterday, but Keegan Bradley is really the guy to keep an eye on for the Ryder Cup. I mean, it's got to be. He was in that sort of bubble position. He's come out and he's put himself in T3 after like being in a poor starting position. So realistically, like Keegan Bradley is the guy to keep an eye on. I mean, there's really nobody else. I mean, Russell Henley potentially if he ends with like a burner round or something, or maybe Lucas Glover. But I think it's Keegan who's put himself back in the conversation. I'm not sure if it's going to be enough, but he's the guy to keep an eye on.
All right, Jeff Ulrich, appreciate you, dude. We will talk to you later this week. We got to take a break, folks, but here on The Sweat presented by DraftKings, coming up next, we'll be joined by Ross Tucker. He will tell us why the Trey Lance experience failed in San Francisco, plus Jules and Steve will be back to tell you who they are taking the wide open NFC South. All right, Ross Tucker, former NFL lineman, host of the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Good Sunday morning to you. How goes it?
I'm fired up, man. I'm ready to go. It's hard to believe we're only a couple weeks away. Called a college football game last night, Vanderbilt, Hawaii. So did a bunch of preseason games already. I feel like I'm already like in the swing of things, dude.
Yeah, dude, following you on social media, you're already in mid-season form. Preseason action wraps up tonight here, Ross. What are players feeling right now around the league? Like, you've been in their shoes. What's going through their minds, especially those on the roster bubble?
Well, a lot of different emotions depending on where you're at, right? There were a couple years where I knew that I was going to be on the team. That's a good feeling, but for me back in the day, I was still competing for the starting job, at least I thought. So it was still important to me. Then there's a lot of other years where I felt like it could maybe go either way. And what you know is, for the guys that are still playing today and tonight, that, the last impression could make a big difference. For the guys that already played, oh man, Emerson, you are on pins and needles. Now, there's a decent amount of guys that probably know that they're going to get cut. But here's the thing, man. Now that there's 16 guys on the practice squad, and now that 6 of those guys can be veterans, I think a lot of those guys just want to make sure they're there, right? I mean, even if it's not active roster, you're still getting paid a couple $100,000 to play football. And if you're a veteran, and you're on the practice squad, still counts for your benefits. So I think all those guys are just praying and hoping that they can at least stick around. If it's not on the active roster, they can be on that 16-man practice squad.
Well, it's something we've talked about too with Jules and Steve here. Ross, how much stock are you putting in all of this preseason action when it comes to making futures bet on the DK Sportsbook?
Probably not a lot. I don't think the preseason is very good for determining how good teams are or not, how good units are or not. I will say this, though, Emerson, I do put a decent amount of stock in individual player performance. And I do that because, and I've said this on the Ross Tucker podcast, every guy out there is trying to play their best. I can assure you. Nobody goes out there and is like, yeah, it's preseason. I'm not going to really try. No. If they're out there, they're trying to perform to the best of their ability. So I would say that there's some offensive lines that have been concerning to me, such as Carolina, that you look at, you're like, I don't know. And I think if you're going to make a futures bet, maybe based on anything we've seen, maybe taking the under on some of these teams that are clearly going to be starting rookie quarterbacks, right? Seems pretty obvious that there's going to be some growing pains. Carolina, Houston, Indianapolis. I certainly would be more inclined to go under on those teams than I would over.
How about this Trey Lance situation in San Francisco, which is now a Trey Lance situation in Dallas after the 49ers shipped him off to the Cowboys on Friday night for a 4th-round pick. So 2 years ago, Ross, the 49ers take this massive gamble, trading 3 first-round picks, I believe 4 picks total, to land this kid. You tweeted about how big of a failure this was. Why did this not work out?
Well, I think it didn't work out for a couple reasons. Number one, you'll never convince me that this is the guy they wanted when they made that trade. I believe that they wanted Mac Jones when they made that trade, although I don't know if that would have been a ton better, right, Emerson?
True.
I mean, then they would have Mac Jones, but they probably wouldn't have Purdy, and Purdy's a lot cheaper, right? So I don't know if that would have been that much better. So number one, if you're going to trade a boatload of picks, make sure you know who it's for. And don't trade a boatload of picks for the 3rd pick where you don't control who goes 1 and 2. I will say this, though. It didn't work out because of the injuries and because Purdy's good. I applaud what the Niners did. Listen, every GM, every front office has a batting average. None of them bat 1,000. This was a big swing and a miss by John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. Move on. Admit you made a mistake, move on. It's a sunk cost at this point. I think it's great that they were able to get his salary, over $6 million, off the books, able to get something back, and now they can move forward. They got a really good team. They might go to the Super Bowl and win it.
Well, have you had more time to think about Lance's fit in Dallas? I know on Friday night when the trade went down here, I saw on Twitter, you said interesting fit. Didn't see that one coming.
Right. I mean, laughable to me,
Yeah.
Emerson, the people saying that it's leverage against Dak. Really? You sure about that? Okay, so at the end of the year, what are the Cowboys going to say? Dak, you better sign this, or we're going to go with the guy the Niners didn't even want as their third-string quarterback and who's played in 8 games. Give me a break, dude. That's not leverage. The thing I don't understand about Trey Lance going to Dallas is everyone agreed he needed to play. Everyone agreed he needed to go somewhere where he could compete to start and play. The Cowboys are like the same situation as the Niners.
Yes.
I mean, now he's trying to beat out Cooper Rush for the backup job, just like he was trying to beat out Sam Darnold for the backup job. I don't understand. He went to this almost the same situation, same scenario. I want him to go to a bad team or a team that would actually let him play some games this year, especially if the starter faltered.
I didn't see Dak Prescott on that piece you wrote up about the 10 most underrated players entering this NFL season. Is there a player that a lot of people have pushed back on that you included on that list you wrote up?
Oh, yeah, Kirk Cousins.
Yes. Yeah, I saw that.
People hate Kirk Cousins. Everybody pushes back. Let me just tell you, the last 8 years, the guy has not missed a single game due to injury. They sat out one because they were in the playoffs. He missed one with COVID. But he hasn't missed a single game due to injury the entire time he's been a top 15 quarterback. There's certainly been times where he's been a top 10 quarterback during that stretch. Now, you know this as a Jags fan. And now you got Trevor Lawrence. That's a little bit different. But do you know how many franchises right now, if I said to them, you can get top 10 to 15 quarterback play every week for the next 8 years, I mean, there are owners that would pay millions and millions and millions of dollars to lock that in. Never misses a game, plays very consistently. No, he's not Mahomes. He's not Burrow. Guess what? Good luck getting one of those guys. Cousins is criminally underappreciated in my mind.
All right, who would land on your criminally overrated list right now in the NFL? Is someone at the top of that thing?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think probably rather than individuals, there's probably some teams out there that I think people are a little bit higher on than I am. I think one of them is the Baltimore Ravens, and one of them's your Jacksonville Jaguars.
Oh.
I'm doing my best to try to not get invited back on the show. But listen, I'm concerned about the Jags O-line. There is no question.
Me too.
You lose Jawan Taylor, Cam Robinson suspended. That's a great way for the season to get off to a terrible start in Jacksonville. And then in Baltimore, all of this spread offense and Lamar Jackson saying it's more throwing, less running. Are we sure that's a good thing? Are we sure? I mean, he took the league by storm with the quarterback-centric run game. Now he's going to chuck the ball over to who? Rashad Bateman?
Mm-hmm.
Odell Beckham Jr.? I have serious doubts about the Ravens offensively this year.
All right, Ross, good stuff, dude. Always a pleasure to have you here on The Sweat. Do not forget, you can find them absolutely everywhere, but especially right here on DraftKings Network with the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, even on Mondays. So many shows, not to mention calling college football games, NFL games. The guy is everywhere. But we're going to bring back Steve and Julian real quick to hit on something Ross just mentioned, the Lions and Ravens. Overrated, question mark? Steve, you are with Ross in terms of Detroit being overrated. Why is that?
Yeah, I think they can be. I think they far exceeded any type of expectations that anybody had of them last year. Obviously, Jared Goff playing one of his best seasons that we've seen in years. I just don't know if they can repeat that type of performance that we saw from them last year. I have a lot of worries about their defense too as well. And we saw that. We saw them go into so many shootouts last year. How many of those are you going to be able to keep up with some of these more fast-paced offenses? So I think it's actually legitimate to think that the Lions could be overrated in terms of the public perception of them coming into this year.
And Jules, why do you believe the Ravens
All right,
are
Ross
overrated?
Tucker, former NFL
I don't think the
line-
Ravens are overrated at all, actually. I think that they play in maybe the most difficult division in football, which all those teams, the Bengals, the Steelers, the Ravens, the Browns, we can't see everybody. in the postseason, but Baltimore could easily surprise and win that division, I think. Lamar Jackson's going to be operating in a new offense. They finally have weapons in a guy like Zay Flowers, and you bring in a vet in Odell Beckham Jr. The running game should still be strong, and the defense is strong. I think Baltimore, despite playing some tough competition, which maybe sharpens them for the postseason, is going to be really good this year.
What does success for the Ravens this year come down to in your eyes, Steve?
If they're going to be able to move the ball downfield through the air, that's going to be the biggest thing because that's really where they're going towards. And the draft really showed that too, drafting Zay Flowers.
All right, everybody, one final break to go, one final block to go. We will talk the division of mediocrity. That would be the NFC South, who Steve and Jules are betting to win the thing when the Sweat presented by DraftKings comes back. Time to wrap up this show with our third and final NFL division preview with Steve Buchanan and Julian Edlow. We are going to focus now on, in my opinion, what is the most unpredictable division in the NFL.
That's a doozy.
I have a prediction.
Okay.
One of these
great.
teams will win.
That is true. That is very true. The NFC South. So really, out of all those teams on the screen, only the Saints have a proven quarterback, which really only adds to the chaos. The Bucs win this thing last year, Steve, with an 8-9 record. That was with Tom Brady under center.
Right.
The NFC South is now Tom Brady free.
Yeah.
But you cannot ignore the fact that it's Baker Mayfield now taking the snap. So where do they sit among your favorites in this division?
I mean, talking about Trey Lance, I thought Tampa was the landing spot for Trey Lance. I think that's where he should have gone, to get some competition and get some reps. So I think that was a missed opportunity there. But when you think about all the playmakers that this team has, they still have Mike Evans. They still have Chris Godwin. Cade Otton was a good rookie for them last year. Their win total is still at 6.5. That just really goes to show how much lack of faith that anybody has in Baker Mayfield. And if you look at their quarterbacks, too, after Jamel Dean, wide receivers 2 and 3 had a ton of success against this team, and that's going to continue this year because they really didn't shore up any of their cornerbacks this year either as well. I think they have literally no shot in this division, and I even think that I would like these other two teams to finish above them. I think Tampa will be in last place when all is said and done. I really, really think they should have gotten Trey Lance and at least tried him at a quarterback.
Jules, the Bucs have an excellent defense. It includes talent on the edge. It's one of the best alt-ball linebacker duos. Yeah, no, they do, because you got Levante David there, you got Devin White, you got an okay secondary. He's already mentioned. Steve has Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Those guys should help prevent this ship from sinking completely. Yes.
Well, their center is out for the year too.
Yeah, well, I'll get to that. So,
Good.
and he's been out, but now it looks like a career-ending injury for Ryan Jensen. But on the defense. Emerson says the defense is good, so it's good.
I literally just named.
That's
off
why you're the host,
multiple
not
guys.
an analyst.
Yeah,
you can't argue with that.
You read some names, and I can't argue that you read names off of your laptop.
Thank you. That
Why
is very
did that
true.
defense not play well last year? They could not get it together. And then, like Steve said, when those front seven aren't playing to the potential that they should, and there's so many holes in that secondary, they're going to keep giving up points. So I don't think the defense is going to play very well. The offensive line that couldn't protect Tom Brady arguably gets worse to now protect Baker Mayfield, which is maybe the largest, has to be the largest quarterback downgrade in the NFL this season. And I am with Steve. If your starting quarterback is Baker Mayfield, that's probably a good time to get in on a former number 3 overall pick and see if there is anything there that San Francisco missed. I don't even know how to bet Tampa this year. You could go look at the win total. I was thinking maybe fade Baker Mayfield on some props. He was just announced the starter. Those aren't even on the board. There's the running back situation isn't clear enough to back or fade anyone. You could look to unders on Godwin and Mike Evans if you think the quarterback situation is going to be a mess. This is the only team. We're previewing every division, every team. This is the only team. I don't have a bet. Yeah. I don't know. I just know Tampa's going to be bad.
All right. How do you feel about the Saints? Because arguably have the most balanced team, right, in this division, Jules. When you look at offense, defense, I mentioned Derek Carr, probably the only proven quarterback in this conference here. It feels like they'll be hosting a postseason game come January, and they'll get pounded in it, right?
We'll see how the game goes. We'll see how good the Saints are. But, yeah, I'm not a Derek Carr guy, but I have some confidence in the Saints this year. He's capable. He has weapons to work with, both in the backfield and at receiver. They should do a decent job protecting him, and they have a solid defense. They have a solid coaching situation. So in a division where we can't trust much, Tampa likely crashes and burns. Bryce Young, love the upside, but we got to see what's there as a rookie. And Ritter, essentially, he has a little bit under his belt, but that's essentially a rookie quarterback for a Falcons team that doesn't have a very good defense. They did make some upgrades, Atlanta, we can talk about, but I just think New Orleans getting a plus tag there on the division. We've talked about some ones, the Chiefs, the Jags, the Niners, where you got to lay juice. Anything plus with New Orleans to win this division, I'm in. I think they're just so much more polished than all these other question marks.
Yep.
Bukes, Saints to make the playoffs, yes, minus 190 on the DraftKings Sportsbook, no plus 160.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go with the under on their win total at 9.5. I think they're a good team, but like it wouldn't shock me if they went 9-8, 8-9, even in this division. Like I don't think they have enough.
8-9 got it done last year.
Yeah, I mean exactly. I mean 8-9 gets it done, and they can still win the division. But like to get plus money to go over 9.5 and to say you're going to get double-digit wins, I just don't think that's enough for me to go over that win total because they are, like I mentioned, they are a good team, but I don't think that they're a great team in this division almost by default at this point. I mean Derek Carr is the most stable quarterback that they've had really since Drew Brees retired after the 2020 season. So, that's going to be an upgrade. But, like, what are we going to get from this offense? Kamara's going to be out on suspension to start. Is Michael Thomas going to be healthy? Chris Olave is probably the most consistent guy that they have on this offense, and that's fine. But really after that, it's just wide open for me. So I'm going to take the under on their win total. I think they'll be right there, but just at 105 to go over, it's just not enough for me to say they're going to win double-digit wins.
The only problem, real quick, with the win total is just 6 games right there.
Sure.
Like, that could be 5-1.
Yep.
And then you're in a little bit of trouble. But double digits does seem like a reach, even if they are, heavy division favorites.
Yeah.
And Bukes, the division, as we've mentioned already, clearly lacking clarity here. So maybe you feel like taking a shot on the Panthers. Frank Wright is now calling the shots as head coach, and this time he gets to work with Bryce Young. So, and that's an owner that's really going to spare no expense in the team's pursuit of becoming a contender here.
Yeah, again, I think the under is going to be the play here, under 7.5 wins. I mean, if you look at the odds and the lines for the first, for the entire season, the first time that they're favored is in week 8 against the Texans, and that's after their bye week. Then they have a hellacious schedule right after the game against the Texans. When you look at their schedule after that, they have 3 games within 2 weeks between November 5th and 19th. They face the Colts, the Bears 4 days later on Thursday Night Football, and then the Cowboys next Sunday. So that's going to be a pretty tough stretch for them to come out of that bye week. So when you have a situation where their first time that they're favored is all the way in week 8, where are those 8 wins going to come from if that plays out as it is? So I think under 7.5 wins is the play in this one here. Again, really bad division. They could pick up some of those divisional wins, but at least as how the lines are set right now, Carolina could be in a real big trouble to start off the year. Then they have that really tough stretch after the bye week. So I think going under that total is the way in this one.
What's your confidence level in Bryce Young here? Number 1 overall pick. Struggled in the first 2 preseason games, Jules, but appears to save his best for last in game 3.
Yeah, I don't care if Bryce Young and I maybe are around the same height. I think he's a very good quarterback. He did not prove it in the preseason. I don't think he'll necessarily even prove it this season, but he is extremely talented, and I like the future for him. They just need to get weapons around him. A lot needs to change in Carolina, but I think the future is bright for Bryce Young, maybe just not right away. We're previewing every team. Steve and I think, are yet to give out the same bet on any team, but we're aligned here. It's under 7.5 for me. We're just talking about the Saints and how they should win this division relatively easily with maybe around 9 wins. So what, Carolina's going to be chomping at their heels with 8 wins? I don't see them getting there. I think under 7 is the play. I think this season is more about grooming a Bryce Young, seeing what he becomes, but I don't think that they're going to be threatening to win this division.
I will say real quick, too, if you do like the over of 7.5 wins, I think you'd actually also have to maybe take a look at their division odds, too, as well, because if they're in that same realm, like where I like the Saints to go under their win total, if we're talking about 8 wins and then 9 or 10 for the Saints, they're both going to be right there. So I don't have vision, but that, again, is just to show how poor this division is.
And one quick thing not to do, I know we're dealing with the NFC overall, which doesn't have that many heavy hitters. It's going to be a weird postseason field. Don't bet any of these teams probably to make the playoffs. Like, if you think the Panthers are going to make the playoffs, you're saying they're going to upset and probably win the division. So just get a better price on the division rather than to make the playoffs with any of these teams here.
All right, about a minute and a half to go in show here, guys. How do we feel about the Falcons? Maybe they have finally found their franchise quarterback, Steve. We certainly know they're leaning into that top 5 rushing attack with Bijan Robinson, who was going high off draft boards in fantasy drafts.
No, you know what? I don't mind taking the over on the passing yard to Ritter as 2,600.5. I like the over on that one there. I mean, we're talking about an average 153 passing yards per game if he plays all 17 games. Now, they are going to be a run-heavy team. They had more rush attempts than any other team in the league, but Robinson's going to catch out of the backfield a lot as well, and I think that's actually really going to help boost the number for Ritter overall. So I think taking him to go over the passing yards, they're going to be playing from behind a lot most likely. And I think Ritter, with that low total that he would have to surpass, I think going over the passing yards is a play that you can take here.
I mean, it's a good point, Steve, because, Jules, you got to see improvement out of this defense. It's absolutely crucial if they're going to improve upon that 7-win campaign.
Bijan Robinson's a stud, but stud running backs don't turn your franchise around. Yes, they made some upgrades on defense, but I think a little bit too much hype. I mean, Ritter could clearly go over his passing yards. I don't think he's necessarily the guy. I would be looking at an under win total or a miss playoffs. I think a winning season and making the playoffs, that's a little lofty for this Falcons team.
I mean, Steve, do you agree with all the Bijan Robinson hype?
I mean, look, hype and running backs usually don't go well together, especially in the rookie year. But if there's anybody that can do it, it could be him.
All right, gentlemen, that's how you do what you just did. Our first weekend of the Sweat presented by DraftKings on
Smooth.
DraftKings Network.
That was
Extremely, extremely smooth. And on VSiN has wrapped up. So that means with it being Sunday and us wrapping up this show, the next time you will see us here will be Saturday, 8 o'clock Eastern time. Gentlemen, nice work. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us this weekend. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we'll see you Saturday morning at 8.